What's this? A letter for me.
Welcome back to another episode of Remember the Great Sports. Today I have 3 envelopes that I'm going to share with you that I just got back in the mail. 2 of them I am unsure who they are, but one of them has a return address on it. I am not going to share that return address only because I don't want to put that individual's information out on the internet. He may not consent to me showing his address, which I can completely understand, but I do have a return label on one of them, and I will do my best to maybe cover it up. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to cover it up, so I'm just gonna show you the envelope. I'll probably wait on that one for last. So we will start with the first one, and the first one is a baseball return, and that is kind of a random one out of my collection. This is former outfielder / second baseman of the Houston Colt 45s, Mr. Mike White. On 1, 2, and 3. So Mr. White signed all 3 of these. He played for the Houston Colt 45s, as I mentioned. He only was in the major leagues for, it looks like, 3 parts of 3 seasons. In 1964, which would have been, right around the time this card was made, he spent 89 games up with the major league club and batted .271. Never hit a home run, and that's about it. 63, he only played in 3 games, and in 65, he only played in 8 games at the major league level. So approximately 100 games in the majors, if you do the math there, which I guess you could do worse things with your life to play 100 games in the majors. I mean, if somebody came to me and said, hey, you're going to be a Major League Baseball player, but you're only going to play 100 games, I would make that trade in a second. So thank you, Mr. White, for signing those. I'm just pulling up his minor league stats here. It looks like 59 was his first year in minor league baseball, and he played through 69. Looks like after he left the Astros organization, he wound up signing with the Cubs in their minor league affiliates, and he played till he was 30 years old, reaching AAA, or spending time in AAA, I should say, with the Cubs for the last 3 years of his career. So, again, not a well-known star, not a major star by any means, but a former major leaguer, played 100 games in the majors, and he's a former Houston Colt 45. There's not a lot of Houston Colt 45 autographs you can still get out there. So I had these 3 laying around in my collection. I picked up over time, picked them up in random lots, and finally put the 3 together, stuck them in an envelope, and wrote Mr. White, and he gladly obliged and signed. So thank you, Mr. White. And we will move on to the next one, which is postmarked from Richmond, Virginia. And that is another old-time player, and it is Mr. Mel Roach on 1, 2, and 3. Different cards. And Mr. Roach played for, as you can see, the Milwaukee Braves. I'm going to pull him up really quick here and see if he played for anybody else, but he was an outfielder, I believe. Never mind. Oh, well, technically he was an outfielder. He was a pinch hitter, second baseman, and left fielder. So I guess that would describe the perfect utility man. So he actually did play for a couple other teams. He played for the Cubs and the Phillies before he finally called it a career. So Mr. Roach was another utility guy, kind of like Mike White. Hung around for quite a while. Spent 8 years in the majors, but lost 2 years to his playing career because he was serving in the military in 1955 and 56. So at just 20 years old, he was in the majors. And he spent, he only played in 5 games in 53, and in 54 he only played in 3. So that tells me he spent a lot of time in the minors those 2 years. But imagine being a 21-year-old in the prime of your development of your career and going off to war for 2 years. That's what Mr. Roach did. So I want to say, Mr. Roach, thank you for your service to this country. You're a dime a dozen. I mean, there's not a breed of ball player like this anymore. There aren't ball players that are fighting wars in today's baseball game. And I admire the type of players like this, like Ted Williams, who fought in 2 wars, actually, in World War II and Korea, that gave up prime of his career to go serve his country. And I'm not going to get into the political debate, about kneeling for the anthem and all that, but the top athletes of their era, Stan Musial, Ted Williams, Bob Feller, gave up Joe DiMaggio, I believe, too. Nah, DiMaggio would have been a little bit older, but he did give up some time due to the war. But these were guys that gave up their profession that were the top athletes of the game. I mean, this would be like, to give you a scenario, not Mel Roach here, but imagine Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, Giancarlo Stanton, and Aaron Judge all leaving for the next 2 years to go serve in the military. That's the equivalent of what happened during World War II. And, I commend everyone that served in those, capacities during their playing days, because that's a rare breed to see somebody that would put their country before a game. Now, it seems the other way around. The game is put before the country. So thank you very much, Mr. Roach. To talk a little bit about Mr. Roach, he was indeed on the championship Milwaukee Braves team that won the World Series, so he is a part of that team, along with Hank Aaron and Eddie Matthews, etc. Del Crandall comes to mind. But like the 1960 Pirates World Series team, there's not a lot of these guys left anymore that you can actually get through the mail. So if you have any cards of Mr. Roach laying around, they're not too expensive to find. This is actually a reprint card out of the Topps archive, so they're, you can get those for under 50 cents probably. But if you grab any of these, pick them up. Definitely send Mr. Roach a few cards and thank him for his service to the United States. All right, so moving on. This next one already has a name on it, so I know who it is. It's a former baseball player. And this is none other than former San Francisco Giants great pitcher, Bobby Bolin on 1, 2, 3 on a miscut card. Wonder whose rookie card that was. On a miscut there, and it's got like a hole through it. Looks like somebody ate it. Get that on camera a little bit better. And finally, this has got to be one of his last seasons. This is him as a Boston Red Sox. So, Bobby Bolin was on the pitching staff with Gaylord Perry and Juan Marichal, which comprised an excellent pitching staff, if you ask me, for the Giants in the 60s. To safely say, from 1961 to 1969, Bobby Bolin was one of the pitchers on the Giants. Those were the seasons that he was a Giant. So, 1 year, I'm looking at his 68 season, he had a 1.99 ERA in 34 starts. Or, 19 starts. So it looks like he played a little bit out of the bullpen, and he started. So he would be like a long reliever type. This would be in case your starter got in trouble, then you'd be facing Bobby Bolin. And also if you wanted to give your guys a couple extra days rest. So his best season, he went 14-6 with a 2.76 ERA, pitching in 45 games. So he was a reliever / starter, and he started 13 games that year in 1965. So 14-6 in 1965 for the Giants. So very excellent career. After he left the Giants, he pitched for 1 year in Milwaukee, which might have been their first year in Milwaukee, actually. Maybe their second year, which obviously they weren't a real good team at that time, the Brewers, that is. Then he signed with the Boston Red Sox, and primarily was only a reliever for them for the last 3 years of his career. So, lifetime for Mr. Bolin, he had 88 wins, 75 losses, and a 3.40 ERA, appearing in 495 games, so nearly 500 games. And of those 500, he started 164. So, very good ball player from that era. Again, very gracious to get those back in the mail. Bolin was a very good pitcher during his era. Part of the Giants teams that were very good with Marichal, McCovey, Mays, of course. You know, the earlier part of the 60s were a lot better than the latter part of the 60s for Mays. On down the list. Gaylord Perry, like I mentioned, would have been on that team. Bunch of great stars on those San Francisco Giants teams from that era. So, thank you, Mr. Bolin. Thank you, Mr. Roach, for signing those three. And thank you, Mr. White, for also signing those. So, hope you guys enjoyed the vintage. Like to throw those oddball names out there that maybe you didn't know were still around, and you know, to help remember them and keep their memories alive. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Look forward to your comments below. Stay tuned for the next video. Thanks.